franchise coach and widely known throughout the country. Harris is known as the go-to resource for career and transition coaches whose clients are exploring the next chapter in their lives. Harris guides clients through an exploration process so they can get enough information and the right information to make a well-informed decision. Harris's philosophy, as you'll see, is on investigating in a franchise. Harris's philosophy on investing in a franchise is that three things need to fall into place. It has to be the right time in their life, it has to be the right concept for you and your family, and it has to be the right investment level. With over 25 years of business experience, including running his family business, he has a broad and accomplished background that spans several industries, including Fortune 500 companies. Harris is renowned for his vast network and unique ability to build meaningful and long-lasting partnerships. When Harris isn't working with clients in transition, he volunteers his time as a live auctioneer, helping nonprofits achieve their fundraising goals. To date, he's raised over $2 million for charity. Thank you so much, Harris, for volunteering your time. And take it away, Harris.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Nancy, for the clap. It's great to meet all of you. You know, I forgot, I've written the bio, but I just sent it out. So I kind of had a little blurb teed up to share with everybody who I am, but I guess I basically took care of all of that. So, but it's true. So I really guide clients through what is an exploration process. And it's all about the franchisors that are kind of under our umbrella are all great franchisors, but when I use the word great, they're all great to explore, meaning when clients start to learn about those organizations, they're going to hear good things. I always equate it to food because I love to eat. So I always say the franchisors have a great recipe for success. The question is, are you going to like that recipe, right? Just because 100 people invested in the concept or 500 people invested in the concept, there were thousands of others who overlooked it. So again, while they have a great recipe, you're trying to figure out, is it the right recipe for you and your family? And my whole role for clients is really to be a sounding board and a guide, but most importantly, to challenge assumptions, right? To make people think about things differently, to peel back layers of the onion to see if that opportunity is right or isn't right for them. So for today's Job Seeker Workshop, it's really going to be more of a conversation than just a straightforward presentation. I find that everybody's kind of zoomed out on presentations. They have that Zoom fatigue. So, you know, I want it to be interactive. And I would say before I highlight some frequent questions that I get about franchising, I just wanted to check in with everybody. And if you don't mind, you can unmute yourself and just share your question with me, or even type it in and Nancy will feed it over to me or let me know that it's there. Is there a topic or question about franchising that you'd like me to answer that's top of mind that I can weave into, like thread into the conversation? And again, if you want to unmute and just throw out your question that's top of mind, feel free.
Did I make it seem like I had a question?
No, but do you?
Me? I don't, no.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
I can ask a question. Is there a typical lead time, Harris, from start of exploration to, you know, decision and you're actually in business?
Yeah. Yep. Great question. What else?
Harris, I had a question about, I had a couple of friends who, I guess, got into franchises, and then they were talking about all the fees that are involved in paying, whether or not the business does well. They are still obligated to pay these fees. So if you could talk about how that affects us, that would be good too.
Okay, great. What else comes to mind? Anybody else?
How do you get the funds to buy
I don't know if
in?
you can hear me on the phone, but I'd be interested in knowing how much leverage potential franchisees have in the negotiation process with respect to the terms of the agreement, or is it pretty much that the franchisor controls all the terms and has most, or if not all, the leverage?
Great question. Okay, these are perfect way to tee it up. So before we dive into it, and I'll probably share, a handful of slides just to give a little bit of a visual as I speak, but basically franchising, it's as simple as it's a licensing of someone else's business name and methods. So what typically, that's really in its simplest form, licensing someone's name and their methods. So if I open up my slide deck here and I scroll through, and let's see if it'll let me enter. Hold on one sec. Oh, I'm gonna have to use this. I always ask, what do you think of franchising? Can everybody see my presentation, by the way?
No.
No. Okay. Hold on one sec.
Did you share the screen?
Yeah, I didn't, but I'm gonna. All right.
Beautiful. We see it, right? Does everyone see it? Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, I always ask what comes to mind when people think of franchising. So a lot of times people think of these common franchisors, right? McDonald's, 7-Eleven, KFC, Pizza Hut, Wendy's. It makes sense. These are the top 10 largest brands in the world. And there are so many other franchise concepts out there other than fast food. In fact, there's 3,500 different concepts out there, and many of them are not in fast food. When you think about the categories, there are actually 6 basic categories. You have fast food, you have automotive, and you have retail. Then you have B2B, you have B2C, business to consumer, or what I call business to homeowner, and education. And many of my clients will really fall into the latter 3 categories. The reason for that is they're less capital intensive. So most of my clients will invest anywhere from about $350,000, give or take, down to about $50,000. So there's a perception out there that when it comes to franchising, you need $1 million to invest, which makes sense because everybody thinks of McDonald's and Burger King, and those are, again, heavier investments, close to that $1 million. When you finance your investment, it's like purchasing a home. So you are putting about 20-25% down and you're financing the rest. We're going to talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of really good concepts out there, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of terrible concepts out there. And that's when you really hear the horror stories like, oh my gosh, I know somebody that did this. They lost the shirt, the shirt off their back. It created financial ruin for them, whatever it might be. And typically when you start to dig down on why that person didn't do well in franchising, it was either a poor franchisor or they didn't have an advocate for them. So whoever you use, whether you land up exploring franchising with me or you decide you want to explore, I always encourage people to work with a coach. Just like you do here at Jev's, you work with a coach to get you from point A to point B through your transition period. A really good coach is invaluable, and a good coach is going to be an advocate for you and take an unbiased approach, so you can really get enough information and the right information to make a well-informed decision. And that well-informed decision could look like, hey, Harris, I want to move forward, or you know what, it's a good concept, but it's not really the right fit for me. So let's go on to round 2. things to think about when you're looking at concepts that you want to keep in mind. And again, a good coach can help you with this is the concept should have the 4 following qualities. It should have longevity. Not all of them do. Even some of the concepts I talk to clients about, they don't have longevity, which is okay, because you want to keep it fresh. There's always new concepts coming out, and plenty of them are worthy of exploration. Concepts should be well known in their space, right? So you and I might not have heard of them. It's not a McDonald's, it's not a Subway when you're driving along the road, but they're well known in their vertical. Good ROI, right? So that's very subjective. What does that mean? So most of my clients are used to making 6 figures. They want to know that they can get back there at some point. So they want to know when they do validation, meaning speaking with other franchisees who are in the system, that they're hearing that that they'll be on track to get back to those numbers that they want to get to, and a company that's reputable. So those are the 4 characteristics that I encourage everybody to look for, and those are the things that I look for when working with a client. So I've kind of reversed engineered my presentation to get to the meat and potatoes of franchising. Everybody wants to know about the investment. So I'm going to start with that and kind of work my way back. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And this is really just saying there's 3,800 concepts. There's 750,000 units out there, locations. It doesn't take $1 million to invest. And franchising is really a very overwhelming space. Even my clients with the best acumen really are challenged on how to distill it down, because if you just Google the word franchise, you get 300 million results, and everybody's an award winner, right? Everybody's a #1 this and a top 5 that. So it's like, how do you really figure out what's the best criteria for you? And I go through a very methodical process with my clients to align them with concepts that are really going to resonate with them. We don't know if they're going to be the right fit out of the gate, but we know that they're going to be in alignment with their goals and what they're looking to do. So I'm just going to move on here. A lot of times you'll hear that when you're in franchising, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself, because you have the expertise of the franchisor. And depending upon the system that you're in, you'll see there's a lot of support, there can be a lot of support from fellow franchisees. They may have chat rooms, they may hop on a call every other week or once a month. You can pick up the phone. So that's another thing that I counsel clients around, is find out if the franchisor is very collegial, and what the kind of fabric of the organization is from a personality standpoint, to see what that support level is going to be. So we went through that category list. Going back to how there are 750,000 units, by the numbers, it's very telling. So less than 15% of retail and service locations, right? And when you're driving around, there's so many franchises that you might not even know are a franchise. Great Clips, Supercuts. I could go on and on. Even though less than 15% of them are retail and service locations, they make up 40% of sales in retail and service. So revenue per unit, they do more than just an independent. So when you think about ways to go into business, right, there's 3 ways. You can either go in and start your own business, you can go in and buy an existing business, or you can franchise. So franchising is a great way to mitigate the risk. There's never going to be zero risk, but it's a great way to mitigate the risk. And I'll talk about, why that is and why clients gravitate towards that. Just thinking about different categories, right? Knowing that there's about 3,800 different concepts, and everybody always thinks of just, fast food. I always like to put up this category list because it really shows you how diverse the franchise industry is. So I'm just going to leave this up here. You could take a snapshot of it if you'd like. It really is a pretty solid list in terms of diversity of different areas that are available to, you know, people like you and me. Now, in terms of the investment, right, because people always want to know, well, what's my investment going to be? How does that all work? I brought that up to kind of the beginning of the presentation. Again, most of my clients will invest anywhere from $350 all the way down to $50,000. So a lot of times the perception is, well, if I only invest 50, how am I really going to make the money that I want to make? There is no relationship between the amount of money you invest and the amount of money you can earn. So for example, there's some great education or after school enrichment programs out there where the investment is on the lower side, and they have a lot of top performing franchisees. In fact, one of their best performing franchisees of a particular brand, the investment's $50,000. They've been in the system for 15 years and they're now doing $1 million in revenue. Okay, so they're not netting $1 million. They're probably netting a decent amount, but their revenue is $1 million, which is very surprising to a lot of people. Things to think about with your investment is the cost of needed assets, and that's going to drive the cost of the investment. So if it's retail or there's a lot of equipment, that's going to drive the cost of the investment, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because what you're trying to discern is, fine, even if the investment is a little greater, what's the return going to be? Is the return going to justify the investment? And a lot of times you see that it will. You're going to have your ramp up time. You're not going to be profitable in month 1 or month 2 or even month 3. So you have to look at that ramp up time and see what's palatable for you and your family. And when you think about the total investment, you're thinking about, you know, what are my upfront costs plus any working capital needs. So here's a very simple example. So upfront costs to the business might be all in, let's say $70,000. You know that you're going to need about $30,000 for the next 3 to 6 months. So that total investment is going to be $100,000. And then the next question that people have in mind is, well, how do I know what all those numbers are going to be? And in one of the great things about exploring franchising is you have a lot of free information. So you get to speak to the franchisor, who's going to tell you all about the great things about the business model. But then you get to read the FDD, which is the franchise disclosure document. Okay, within that document, it's regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, and it has chapters, if you will, in the FDD. It's called items. So there's like 20 or 30 different items. And in that document, the franchisor will disclose the least amount of money that was invested and the most amount of money invested, as well as those fixed costs for everything within the business model. So you could see everything right there in front of you. And then the third step with free information is you're also able to speak to all of the franchisees that came before you. So whether you speak to 5 franchisees, 6, 7, 8, 10, a dozen franchisees, you're asking them questions about how to run the business, do they like the business, so forth and so on, as well as the financials. And the reason why they'll answer those financial questions for you is they've all been in your shoes before, and they've all gone through the same level of due diligence. In terms of the investment, typically it's about 20% down, and then you're going to finance the rest. Okay, the minimum required liquid capital is between 25 and 50,000. Sometimes it can be a little bit more. And the way to finance your investment, there's lots of different ways. You could do a traditional bank loan. Sometimes that work for folks. Something that's very popular is the SBA loan. There's another program called a rollover for business startups, which actually allows you to use money from your 401k or IRA and roll it into the business without penalty. So basically you're taking stock from a public organization and rolling it into your own stock in your company. And there's a way to do that with very specific companies that handle this rollover for business startups, which is commonly known as a ROB. And some clients will say, you know what, that's fine. I don't mind taking some of that money and investing it in myself. And then I have other clients that have a hard and fast that say, hey, I would never, touch my nest egg.
Michael has a question.
Yeah, please, Michael.
Michael Colbert.
Well, I'm going to preface it with this because I read this and I wanted to know, from your point of view, if it means they worked with the wrong people or what the case might have been. Because the story actually made either the local paper or business journal I was reading or whatever, but there was a couple, I guess, who was looking for a franchise. And they wound up doing a Quiznos, and Quiznos told them, well, one area we could give you is the Ironbound section of Newark, which is primarily a Portuguese area. Well, it turned out they didn't last very long because apparently I was going to say menu isn't the right word, but the cuisine, I guess, was not in line with the kind of food typically Portuguese people would be interested in. And I guess from your point of view, does this say they were working with the wrong people, they got the wrong advice, they were just pushed into a territory that, Quiznos didn't have a franchisee in? I mean, obviously they got something bad along the way.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So I can't speak to what may have happened in that particular situation, but the counsel I would give a client is the following, okay? When somebody sits down with me and we go through the list of concepts that are in alignment with what they're looking for and their kind of lifestyle, you have to validate. Validation is essential. You need to speak to multiple franchisees. So people will say, well, Harris, what's the magic number? So the number is however many people you need to speak to get comfortable with that concept. So I know it's more than 3, because a lot of times clients will say to me, well, I spoke to 3 franchisees, I had great conversations. And I always say you need to do a little more due diligence. So I always say at least 5 franchisees you should speak with, okay? And really dig down on all of the questions that need to be answered in order to make a well-informed decision. So you want to get enough information and the right information. The other thing is when people look for concepts, typically they don't even know that franchise coaches exist. So there's tons of franchise coaches across the country, okay? But people don't recognize that or know that. So what they'll do is they'll find something online, or they'll be driving by, or they'll eat at a place and they say, oh, I really like this. Then what they do is they pick up the phone, they call the franchisor, and the challenge there is they're now dealing with a salesperson. And what does the salesperson want to do? They want to sell you a franchise. So they're not an advocate, right? They're not looking at the business from different angles. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? How is this going to impact you, right? So there's lots of different things. In terms of specific area, that does come up plenty in conversations. And usually there's a way to validate if the concept will work in that area. So what I would have counseled the client around is, hey, go back to the franchisor, you know your area best, ask the franchisor if they're set up in any other Spanish speaking or foreign communities in the US, okay? And how are those doing there? And then can you put me in touch with those franchisees so I can validate? That's the way I would progress through that. So there's lots of variables there, Michael, but there's a way to hopefully figure out if the concept is going to make sense or not. Any other questions around that, or that just kind of come to mind?
Harris, just to finish your thought, then you definitely need validation that's independent then of the company that's offering the franchise.
Correct. So always speak with franchisees. And the best way to go through the exploration process is you do want to use your franchisor and the franchisees that are already in the system as your benchmark first, okay? Because they're going to give you some context for the business concept. Then if anybody wants to do outside research, which is all at your fingertips anyway, whether you're going through Google, you're speaking to friends and family, then you can have a healthy dialogue with those who are closest to you, right? Who are in your circle of trust, and say, well, I spoke to 10 franchisees and they all said the opposite of what you're saying. You have some context for that conversation. That's one of the best ways to go about it. I know somebody had asked me about fees involved. We're not going to get too much into all of the fees, but I can tell you that when you do read the FDD, again, all of those fees are going to be listed. One of the biggest concerns about fees is the royalties. Franchisors are in business to make money. And the more money that you make, the more money that they make. So a really good franchisor is going to be extremely supportive, because the better you do, the better they're going to do. And when it comes to the royalty, a lot of times people say, well, is it really worth it? And that's a question that you ask for all the franchisees that have been in the system. So, you know, if people are doing well, I always say the price of admission is, you'll typically find, is worth it. A lot of times clients will say to me, hey, Harris, you know, why even work with the franchisor? Can't I just do this on my own? Yes. I mean, most of these concepts you can completely do on your own from scratch. But what the franchisor is giving you, what you're investing in, is a proven business model, so you can reduce your risk. And you don't have to go through all the trials and tribulations that everybody else, that the franchisor has gone through. They're giving you the recipe for success. And what you're trying to figure out is, do I like that recipe? Here's just a list of different ways to finance your deal. I spoke about some of these. I'll leave that up there for a minute. Typical lead time to get into a franchise, on average, if we find something that a client likes, from the time they start to explore till the time they sign their service agreement, it's about 3 months. I've worked with clients for 3 months. I've worked with clients for 3 years, but typically that's the average. And that gives you plenty of time to speak to the franchisor, read the FDD, do your validation, and set up your financing.
Hey, Harris, can you repeat the lead time again? You blanked out for me anyway.
Yeah, sure. Typically about 3 months. I've had clients do it as short as 2, and I've had clients, you know, work with me for up to 3 years because they've landed a role, they've paused, and then they come back. But when you find a concept that you like, till you sign the service agreement, the franchise agreement, it's about 3 months. What other questions come to mind for everybody? I'm just looking at some of the questions that were shared with me. And I'll keep going here. A really great question that you should be asking yourself, I'm not going to go through all these questions, probably the number one is, does your family support you? That's the most important question. So as you start to think about franchising, you should have an open and honest dialogue with your husband, your wife, your partner. So they're on board, because I've had a lot of instances where we've gone down the path, but they didn't really inform their significant other. And when it was time to make a decision, it fell through. And it's a shame, because a lot of effort was put in on their time, but there wasn't open and honest dialogue there. And what holds people back from franchising? Because most people do not go into a franchise. So I would say 10% of my clients, just to give you some context, are done with corporate America. They do not want to go back. The other 90% fall into two buckets. The first bucket is, hey, Harris, I would like to own my own business. And that's why we're talking. And I really don't want to go back to corporate, but I'm going to hedge my bet and still apply for roles. And then the other bucket is, you know what, Harris, I'd rather go back to corporate, but my coach told me I should speak to you. So the biggest thing that holds people back is risk. And here's a very oversimplified graph, okay? But there's plenty of data that supports this. With corporate America, your beginning years, you'll see right here in year one, your risk is very little. But as you progress through your career, your risk becomes greater in terms of being downsized, right-sized, or being let go. With franchising, the risk is great in the beginning years, but as you continue to grow your business, the risk is considerably less. Now, it's never going to be zero. We would never say you're going to get to zero, but you're in business for yourself. And the idea is, as you're growing your business, you're bringing on more clients. Those clients are happy with your service. They're providing you with referrals. They're talking to other people. You just naturally grow, et cetera, et cetera. And so my background is I came from a family business, and that's exactly what happened with the business that my mother and father started. It was really tough in the beginning. And then as over time, the business got easier and easier because more and more people found out about the business. So again, it's not about, hey, I want something risk-free. There's always risk involved. It's how do you mitigate that risk? And working with a franchise is really the best way to mitigate that risk.
Hey, Harris, one question on that chart, if you don't mind, the
Yeah.
one you just showed. Was that, is that an intentional starting point at the 70%? Like, as in 70% of franchisees fail in the first year? Is that true?
No, that's not intentional.
Okay.
That's not intentional. That's a good question, though. Actually, anecdotally, people want to know what the success rate is in franchising. Anecdotally, there's a 70% success rate. That's what you'll typically hear in the franchising world. But no, that is unintentional as to what we started.
Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
good to hear.
Yeah. Has anybody read this book, The Millionaire Next Door? It's a great read. And to distill it down, these two gentlemen, these two PhDs, when you typically think of millionaires, you think of, athletes and movie stars and, CEOs of major companies. But really, 70% of millionaires own their own business. They're just everyday people that have a business. And that's what their research uncovered. It's a great read. If you like stats, it's got a lot of great numbers, and I highly recommend it. So I talked about this, with the safest path to entrepreneurship, there's 3 ways to go into it: start a business, buy a business, open a franchise. And I'm just going to take a deeper dive here to give you some insight into the advantages of having a franchise. So again, you have a proven system that you're trying to decide, is this the right proven system for me? The franchisor is going to provide a lot of support and training, and you're trying to figure out, is it enough support and training for me, right? So one of the big things that come up in conversation is, hey, Harris, I've never been in sales. So yes, I know I'm going to have to be the face of the business. How am I going to be able to sell? And so the franchisor knows this, and you'll find that many people that invest in a concept never had any experience in that business before. So how could they possibly be successful? Well, the franchisor has given them the tools they need, right? The other thing that makes people successful is you want to look at all of your accolades, all of your success, all of your know-how, and hey, can I parlay that into the business, okay? And most people recognize that after working in corporate for 25, 30 years, that their skill set can translate into whatever business model. You're going to get the FDD, which I discussed, and discussed also doing a lot of free research with the franchisor, the FDD, the franchisees, and any outside research that you choose to do. Proven systems. So I kind of harp on proven systems because when you think about it, does McDonald's make the best hamburger? No. We could all make a better hamburger than McDonald's. You buy better meat, you season it just right, you put it on the grill, it tastes wonderful. McDonald's, it's kind of like a hockey puck, okay? And we all love it because of the taste, I think, maybe with the secret sauce. But the reason why McDonald's is so successful is that they have a proven system. Ray Kroc, when he took over the business from the McDonald's brothers, he implemented a very methodical system to execute the burgers, the shakes, the French fries. So the system is almost more important than the concept, okay? So a lot of clients say, well, I have to like the concept, or some people say I want to be passionate about it, which may be true for some people. But one thing I try and stress or have clients look through a different lens is, can you follow this system to make the money that you want to make or achieve the goals that you want to achieve by following this proven system? That's really important in the franchise exploration process. We kind of talked about this, support and training. Here's the franchise disclosure document, the table of contents. I'm just moving my my view here around. So to the left, you could see it's items, item 1, item 2, item 3. We're not going to go through all of them, but a couple of things to note in terms of litigation. There are plenty of franchisors that may have litigation. It depends what the litigation is. If it's a slip and fall, it might not give you pause for concern. However, if you see a lot of the franchisees are suing the franchisor, you just run and don't walk. It's not a concept that you want to look at, okay? Something else to highlight, whoops, is the item 19, which is going to be the earnings claim. So some franchisors will provide you with a list of earnings that the franchisees have disclosed, okay? And some will be minimal information. Some will have robust information. They all take a different approach. Some franchisors do not have the item 19. There's a reason for that. And there's always a way to get the answer of what the financials are and how well or not well the franchisees are doing. And that's by speaking with the franchisees. So you really get a lot of information. And it also talks about initial franchise fee, other fees, initial investment, going back to that question about what are all of the fees involved in investing in a franchise. I talked about validation. Validation's really important. Some clients will spend a day with a franchisee. If you could do a ride along, that's a great thing to do. When you get through your validation and you feel like the business model is really tracking for you and you think that this is going to be something you want to invest in, a lot of franchisors at the end of the exploration process have what they call a discovery day or meet the team day, where you're able to sit down and speak to the executives from the franchise and speak to those that you're going to be working with on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to say, hey, I'm creating this business marriage for the next 10 years. And am I going to be happy with this? So it's kind of like the icing on the cake. And if anybody wants to jump in at any point and ask me any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Some of the biggest mistakes that people make is before they even begin to explore. Once they even hear the concept, you're naturally, human nature, your own assumptions and perceptions kick in. And you really want to peel back the layer of the onion, because many times there's an opportunity there that you don't know about because you haven't given it enough time. Like a lot of times people will say, you know what, Harris, there's too much competition. You know, how could anybody make any money there? Or I always see those trucks on the road. It's got to be a saturated market. Or I don't want to work 80 hours a week. Or I don't know how to sell. Or, hey, I want to look at this concept because, man, the lines around the door and they look like they're making a ton of money. So you don't want to make up the answers in your mind. There's always a way to get the information, and it's about exploration, okay? It's a big exercise in learning about a business. I cannot stress that enough. And never make decisions based upon fear. I had one client who used to think about it like this when it came to investing in a franchise. He looked at it as though he were going to go back to work, and the task that he was going to do at work, he thought, am I going to be able to perform these tasks? And he equated that to the franchise. Am I going to, if I go to work every day as the franchisee, am I going to be able to execute these tasks? And it helped him take the anxiety out of starting a business. So it's a different perspective, and I always like that. Understand the role of the owner. Many times when somebody finds a franchise on their own, the franchisor doesn't stress certain things because, again, they're selling you a franchise. Understand the role of the owner. People go into a franchise all the time without understanding what the day-to-day is going to look like. What does it look like when you wake up in the morning and you go into the office till noon, till 3, till 6? Is there going to be work that has to be done afterwards for billing and reconciliation? Am I going to have to work on the weekend? What does it look like the first 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months? There's plenty of concepts out there that provide a very flexible lifestyle. There's always a lift in the beginning, of course, right? There's a runway, and you want to find out if that lifestyle with whatever concept it is going to make sense for you. Important input. When you get down to saying, okay, this is the concept that's going to be the right fit for me and my family, and that's the right time in my life, and that's the right investment amount, I say to build an advisory board, one of them being a franchise attorney, not a business attorney, not a general practicing attorney. A franchise attorney is essential. It's like going to your primary care physician for a heart problem. You would never do that. You would go to a cardiologist. A franchise attorney is going to, that's all they do is read agreements all day long. And basically they're looking at the agreement, and they're hopefully, and you'll learn this from your exploration with the franchise attorney, what are the services you offer me, they're going to provide you with a report for things that you should be aware of. And so going back to the individual's question, I forget who asked it, about how much leverage does a franchisee have? That's where the franchise attorney can help you. To answer the question, you really don't have a lot of leverage, okay? You just want to understand in the agreement what your obligations are. You want to be crystal clear on what you are going to have to do as a Z, and what the franchisor is going to do to support you. So you want to be real clear on that. So that's the benefit of having an attorney. But there's not a lot of wiggle room, okay? Many of my clients, which was surprising to me when I got into this space almost a decade ago, do not have their own accountant or CPA. I always recommend working with an accountant who has 50% business clients and 50% personal, or 60-40, because they're going to be able to help you leverage all of the tax benefits that are available to you when they understand business ownership and personal. So that's really important. Find a good accountant that can help you, get the most money from your business.
Harris, we have a question from Marlon. Marlon,
Sure.
do you want me to ask it, or do you want to ask? Okay, I will ask. I find Amazon reviews to be helpful before purchasing a product. Are there any websites where franchisees review their franchisors? And can we trust these reviews? That's a great question.
That's a great question. Everybody is so conditioned to looking at Amazon. I mean, I read the reviews too. This goes back to what I said earlier. When you explore, there's a methodical way to go through exploration, okay? So you get enough information and the right information. Always use the franchisor and the franchisees as your benchmark, okay? Franchisees are going to give you the unplugged version of their experience with the franchisor. It's like when you go out to a restaurant and you don't have a good experience, you're going to tell everybody about why the service was bad or why the food was cold. Franchisees are the same way, okay? They're not allowed to be compensated for their discussions with you, okay? That's illegal. And you'll find that they're going to be really open and honest with their experience with the franchisor. Then, if you want to do any outside research, again, going online, speaking with friends and family, it's a great thing to do. People are going to do it anyway, but then you have some context for the information that they're giving you, which could be positive information, right? You don't want to take that at face value, and also negative information. In terms of sites, I really haven't taken a deep dive there with the feedback. I've been doing this for almost a decade, and again, my most successful clients have gone through the prescribed business model. So if they did do their own research online and looked at different, review sites, they never came back to me and shared that and the information that they got, whether they move forward or not, was helpful to them. But great question, comes up all the time. Disadvantages, go ahead. Oh, we're at 11 o'clock, Sharon. Do we need to pause for a sec?
Yeah, why don't we pause for a sec, and everybody, I'm going to put the evaluation form. We really need this form. It helps us in the future. It helps Harris. It really is important. And if you don't mind, I'm going to put it in the, okay, I'm going to try to put it in the chat. And if you please take 3 minutes to fill this out. Okay. Okay, does everyone see that? No?
Not yet, Sharon.
Okie dokie.
Do I need to stop sharing?
Okay, now we see it.
Okay.
Oh, now you see it. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Is that Anna? Thanks.
It is. You got it.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes or so. You won't need more than that to fill this out, so that, as I said, we can see what you want to hear more about, and
And please be candid. I'm continually like to improve my presentations, and feedback is incredibly welcomed. I was an art major and have been critiqued my whole life, so I'm happy to get some really solid feedback. We're only going to go for about another 10 minutes, if that, and we can open it up to some more Q&A. I want to make sure you feel comfortable with the information you received, and if you have any other additional questions, I'm of course happy to answer them.
So can everyone see their evaluation, Nancy? And
No, I cannot.
Who is that?
Kurt.
Kurt.
I still see this. I still see the slide on. Oh, now the slide is gone.
Yeah, I stopped sharing. I thought maybe that's part of the problem.
Oh, cool. Click on the link in the chat. Got it. Now I've got it. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that, Kurt.
Now there's a fly in my office.
No.
Oh my gosh. That's never happened before.
He's looking for a franchise. Listen.
Well, yeah, that's right.
We can't hear it.
Sales
We
to
can't
sell.
hear it.
And I'm
Does anyone else need more time? Okay, one more last thing. If you've missed any of our other programs, and hopefully by tomorrow, Harris's program will be up there too. I've left you a link in the chat box that explains how you can look at our YouTube channel and see any of our past speakers. Okay, back to you, Harris. Take your
great. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that, Sharon?
Yes.
All right.
Got it.
So, for somebody who wants to go into business ownership, franchising is great. But, with pros, there's always cons. So disadvantages, things to think about. Franchise fees. Some people just do not want to pay the franchise fees. It's understandable to a point. We could talk about that even further. It does impact the startup costs. So how does that play into your projections and business model? You do have to make royalty payments. I always say the price of admission is worth it. You're not totally in control, right? So if you have a McDonald's and everybody in your town likes mashed potatoes, you can't create a mashed potato bar. You have to have certain guidelines and protocols so there's consistency in the brand. You have flexibility as an owner, but there are certain things that you will have to adhere to. The franchisor is going to have certain restrictions. The number one thing is you need to follow a system. You will find that, let me say this, my clients find with the concepts that I present them, okay, because it's very specific to those 4 things that they should be looking for, okay, which is longevity, companies that are well-known in this space, reputable, and good ROI. What they will find is when they hear, because I get this feedback all the time, when they find that somebody's not performing well in the system, every time they come back and that they will say, oh, that person said they weren't following the system. They were trying to do something on their own. And the successful people will say, You just follow the system. So a lot of times in the space, you'll hear about serial franchisepreneurs where they invest in one concept and then they invest in something totally different, a totally different franchise. And what they're doing is they're just rinse and repeating. And they find that they can follow this one prescribed system and that they can replicate that that following with another system. So you see that all the time. Oh, this is interesting. I think it goes back to doing outside research. Comments you always hear, right? There's too much competition. You can't make any money doing that. It's a business with low skilled employees. It's too much of a headache, right? I mean, would anybody invest in a concept like this? Probably not. But Wawa is a great example of a very successful business model where there is an abundance of competition and people think, you know, you couldn't make any money doing that. And it's definitely lower skilled employees. Okay. Now, Wawa is not a franchise, but it gives you an idea of how perception, your own perceptions, my own perceptions, comments you're going to hear from trusted individuals who are very well intended, like friends and family, but it's not until you actually do the research that you can see the business model through a different lens. So it's just something to think about. Talked about doing proper due diligence. And I would say the following. Franchise exploration is just a big exercise in learning about a business, okay? It's like doing a research paper, okay? And then deciding, hey, I want to publish it. It should be an enjoyable process, right? But three things have to happen. It has to be the right concept for you and your family. It's got to be the right time in your life, and it has to be the right investment amount. So it works like a perfect triangle. And if you're missing one of those corners, the triangle collapses. So those three things, time and time again, I see over and over again, it all has to come together. And I think I have one more slide. I'll just share with you how my coaching services work. I work like an executive search firm. So just like you wouldn't pay an executive search firm to help you find your role, they're compensated by the company. I work the same way. In fact, the industry standard is all coaches out there like myself, we're all compensated by the franchisor if our client decides to invest. There's an assessment you'll take. It doesn't tell you whether you'll be a good franchisee or not. It tells you what you have more of a bend to, propensity towards. We'll have a deep dive, long, 1 hour long or more conversation. And we're going to figure out, you know, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? I digest all of that, present you with concepts. We talk about which ones we should start off exploring. And then I hold your hand through the entire process from beginning to end. And again, it could be 3 months, it could be 3 years. There's no expiration date. I just want people to enjoy the process and have a good time with it. I'll share my contact information and just open it up for questions.
Anyone have a question? Okay, Harris, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Pardon me if you already addressed them, but I'm doing a lot in the backside of.
That's okay.
So first of all, technology franchises, are those very popular? Is that something relatively new? And are those mostly app oriented?
When you mention technology franchises, like what's an example that comes to mind or a space that you're thinking of?
Oh, it was just on your list of different types of.
Oh, yes.
So I wanted to know what.
And I can bring that list back up. So technology franchises would be, a good example would be a computer consulting organization, okay? Also a computer consulting / organization that manages your PCs on the back end remotely, right? The name is eluding me. So there's other technology organizations that have a more retail bend to them, which is the fixing of, you know, your smartphones or your iPads. On average, each home has 7 devices. So those organizations you'll find are a needed business model. So those are the different type of technology organizations that come to mind.
And those are so that's a pretty small number for all franchises in general, right? It's probably a new thing that's just coming up, or no? There are a
So
lot
they've been around for a few years. I mean, I don't know their numbers offhand, but I would say in the last 10 years that they've been around. You know, like you might know CPR or You Break, We Fix. There's another concept called Nerds to Go that's growing. So they've been around for quite some time, especially the computer consulting and station management for B2B. You know, if you have 5 or 10 or 20 PCs in a company, you need somebody to manage them. So you're always up and running. That's been around for probably 20 plus years.
Okay, and the other question I had that you might have talked about is, do you work with the people that, like, if I have a business and I want to franchise my business out, is that something you do as well?
I don't. That's its own animal. And there are specific organizations that will take somebody that has a concept with, you know, 2 or 3 locations and help them get it to a point where they can then make it franchisable. And that's when I would step in if it makes sense, if it's a good concept. But I do not create, I don't take the concept from concept to franchisor.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody, someone must have a question.
I have a question.
I don't have a question, but
Go ahead,
Anna.
Robin.
Go ahead, Robin.
Robin. It's okay.
I don't have a question, but I just want to maybe reinforce some of what Harris has said. And Harris, you gave an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
I happen to work for a franchise organization, so I was very curious to hear the presentation, and my role is supporting the franchisee. So I guess that would be that person that does the weekly check-in or the monthly check-in. 2 things that I just want to reinforce, and that is, you know, the emphasis that you put on family is just so important. The family has to be on board, because you might think that this is your responsibility, but especially in the beginning when you're putting in a lot of hours, it definitely impacts the family. So just wanted to reinforce that. And then those validation calls, when you're talking to the existing franchisees, so many people do tend to be negative. And Harris, you are spot on when I would say 99.7% of the time when they're negative, please ask them if they're following the system, because they bought a system. The system is what's proven. If you're not following it, most likely it's not going to work. So those validation calls are really important. And Harris, great comprehensive presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And to piggyback off of what Robin just shared, you know, a lot of times the franchisor will provide a client, whoever's looking, with, you know, their top performers. And so people will say to me, well, of course they're going to give me their top performers. They don't want to talk to anybody bad or hear bad things. There's so much value in understanding what the top performers are doing, because you yourself, I'm assuming, are a top performer. So what does it take to excel in the business, right? You want to hear about what you need to do to be a top performing business. Now, there's also value in hearing about how people are performing in the middle and how people are performing at the bottom. But knowing that people are excelling in the business is really important, because then you can say to yourself, okay, well, can I do what that person did? Am I going to feel comfortable doing the necessary steps to be a top performer? Because hopefully anybody views themselves as somebody that's going to be in the top 10%. We don't strive to be in the bottom third. We want to be in the quartile. So, Anna, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tough question, and I don't actually mean it to be that tough, but
Okay.
I'm afraid it will come out that way.
Okay.
So, your position as a franchise coach, through the whole thing, I was thinking of it as you being an independent, contractor, working one-on-one with a person in your own, your advocacy being paid for by, say, me, not me, because I can't afford to do this anytime soon. But
I know where you're going, so keep coming.
But okay, I'm sure you do. That's why I'm saying I don't mean it to be as tough as it's going to sound. So when you just revealed that you're free and that they pay you, now it seems like you're kind of an outsourced, onboarding resource. That makes me really sad.
You mean a conflict of interest, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yes, comes up in most of my conversations, okay? So it's a very easy answer.
Good.
My clients are doing the work. My clients are doing the work. I'm the matchmaker. We sit down. We have a very in-depth conversation. All my clients are 50 to 60 years old, okay? Mm-hmm. They've been in corporate America. Many of them are directors, executives, VPs. These are all smart, intelligent individuals, okay? They're telling me, hey, Harris, this is where I am now. This is where I want to be. There's 3,800 concepts. There's 300 million results on Google. How do I distill it down?
Right.
I present them with concepts as the matchmaker that are in alignment with what they want to accomplish. They're doing all the hard work. They're speaking to the franchisor by themselves, one-on-one. They're reading the FDD, which is 200-300 pages long, okay? Mm-hmm. They're reviewing that FDD with the franchisor, and then they're doing all the validation on their own. They are making the decision 100% on them.
Right. And
so,
they have
what Anna said, though.
Okay.
What Anna said, I think what she's speaking to, though, is that it would be really helpful to know up front, number one, that your services are free to people like us who are listening. And number two, that in some ways you have a vested interest in the franchise deal closing, because unless I'm mistaken, do you get paid by the franchisor whether or not there's a franchise closing, or only if there's a franchise closing? Because that would speak to your motivation. And I think that's what Anna might be speaking to, and what I heard.
That's a fabulous distillation. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer that. So yes, it is. There's no fee to work with me, right? So I work with people for 3 months or 3 years. They're not paying me. So the way, and you don't know me, okay? We're just talking for the first time. We may never talk again, but this is my own personal philosophy. And if you go on my website, my testimonials will give further color and context to what I'm saying. Others may have a different approach. My approach is the following, okay? I went into this business almost 10 years ago. Most people do not go into a franchise. I understand that I'm just having a dialogue or a cup of coffee over Zoom with somebody, and it may never go anywhere. My philosophy is I want my clients to have an enjoyable exploration process, okay? And enjoy our time together. Because if they don't go into a franchise, which most people don't, one day they're going to have a friend or a family member that says, hey, Mark, whatever happened with the franchising, I worked with Harris, he was great, and you have to reach out to him. That's that's my philosophy. And I understand that people have a healthy level of skepticism, okay, regarding, the way the model can work. But from my perspective, it's like an executive search firm, and how an executive search firm would place people. The client, yeah.
It's fine. No, it's fine. But I think the question in my mind is, so are you paid only if there's
only on deals that my clients decide to invest in? Correct. Only on deals that they
invest in. And then in that case, and then you are paid by the franchisor.
Correct. That's an industry standard. That's not Harris Gubin. That's all franchise coaches out there. Correct.
Right.
Got it.
And I have been in business for myself, and I understand that, you know, you are your reputation, and that is everything. So I get that. I really, like I said, I didn't want to give you a hard time, but it is a complication.
Actually, it's a great question. It comes up all the time. I'm happy to address it, and I'm glad you did.
I mean, it's perfect. It's perfectly fine. Just from my point of view, I would just something like that to be put out there at the beginning of a presentation, you know, just to be really clear about, you know, how you operate. That's all. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly fine. It's actually a plus, because I went into this thinking I'm going to be paying, you know, or a family member is going to be paying a hefty hourly rate for this. And lo and behold, there's nothing coming would be coming out of our pockets.
That's a great point. I am happy to put it in the beginning of the presentation, and I can incorporate it that way. It's great feedback, so thank you. Who's saying that, by the way?
My name is Beth.
Beth, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great.
And then I had another question. Well, first of all, the other thing that I would just like to say is that, you know, it sounds like you mostly work with C-suite people. And if people who are here aren't C-suite people, do you work with us?
Yeah. Yes. My clients have a pretty diverse background. I guess maybe C-suite comes up often in my conversation as I talk. We do a national webinar for a financial group. There happens to be a lot of C-suite, but it's a very broad range of clients that I work with in terms of professional backgrounds. So that doesn't matter to me.
Okay, and then another question that I had in your experience, is there room, or does the leverage that the franchisor has is so much more dominant than the franchisee that it's very little to negotiate terms, like a restrictive covenant, like non-disclosure, like what you're paid and when you're paid, and or when you pay? Are you familiar with that?
I don't take a deep dive with the agreements. There's too many. So, you know, it's really incumbent upon my clients to do that level of due diligence. And based upon their level of comfort, they'll either look at the agreement themselves, but most will engage with a franchise attorney so they know exactly what their relationship is going to look like, because it's a business marriage and you should know what you're going to be responsible for.
Right. I guess what I'm wondering, have any of your clients said, you know, they wouldn't budge? You know, we tried to ask them, you know, only for A, B, and C. We could barely even get C out of them.
There's sometimes some wiggle room, but when it comes to fees, no. The fees are going to be straight across the board. The franchise fee is going to be the same for everybody. The royalty payments are going to be the same for everybody. Sometimes there's the ability to change your territory in certain ways, but there's very little wiggle room. Very little wiggle room.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for some people. And you know, you have to get to a point in your mind, if you can, that the way it's laid out, you're going to be able to get comfortable with it, or not, but hopefully get comfortable with it by speaking with franchisees to say, okay, well, there's 500 people in the system or 100 people in the system. We all sign the same agreement. You know, does that make sense for me? Sharon, any other questions come to mind or written into
Nope.
the chat?
Oh, wait, one new message.
I've got one other question, if you don't
Sure.
mind, Harris. I think you mentioned something earlier about following the process was more important than being passionate about the business. About the type of business. Did you say something like that? I might have misinterpreted what you said, but I'm wondering, how important is, really loving that type of business that you select versus being able to follow a process?
I think everybody goes into the exploration initially that they want to be passionate about the business model. What they start to realize is they don't have to necessarily be passionate about it, okay? There has to be interest, of course, right? But if you can get past that passion piece, okay, you'll start to see how the other elements of the concept unfold and how it can get you to where you want to be. And that's almost where the passion picks up that, oh, I could do this. It's not something I'm going to be passionate about. I like the business model. I see the need for the business model. I see other folks are doing well in the business model. And if it can get me to where I want to be, okay, which could mean financial or just flexibility or lifestyle, then you know what? I can wrap my arms around it. Now, with that said, there are some people that really want to connect to the business model. And I get that because I'm one of those individuals, okay? I've been in transition before and I've had a unique path in my life. And I know what it means to be passionate around something, which I am around coaching. I mean, it's totally part of my DNA. But the process for the franchisor is, I want to say, almost more important than that passion piece. And you just see that over and over again with good franchisors.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
And the other thing I would say is basically everything that we spoke about here today. I mean, I've distilled it down, and I think we've an hour and 23 minutes. Compared to, talking to my clients over a 3-month period. The way I look at this presentation is I want to give you everything that I possibly can, the same way I would counsel my clients. So I hope it resonated and it was really good food for thought. And to Beth's point, I plan on following up with everybody once with a link to the assessment. And if you fill it out, I'll know you're interested. And if you don't, you won't hear from me again. I never want to be that persistent person that's a pain. So you only hear from me once.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harris. I appreciate it. We all appreciate you volunteering your time to do this for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and folks, they're on June 24th. That's not this next Thursday, but the next. We have a great program with Adriel, and he is going to do he's got this amazing app for ways to interview better, and I suggest you all come and see it. It's amazing. So, and it's free. So I hope to see you all on June 24th. Thank you again, Harris. That was wonderful. That was great. And does anyone else have any questions about anything related to JBS before we say goodbye? No?
I just wanted to know if Harris is open to LinkedIn connection requests.
Absolutely.
And I'm so sorry. I forgot to say our amazing Nancy Aaron has helped us, and I couldn't have done it without her. And she's the one that fixed the YouTube Zoom, link. So thank you so much, Nancy, for filling in. And Meryl says hello to all of you, and she will be here in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone. This was great.
Thanks all.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Meryl. Thank you, Sharon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.